to elevate your business, taking it to the next level. My name is Dolan, and I am the Professional Development Chair on the ICF board this year, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. So before we get into it, I did want to make sure and thank our OD Network partners. They actually jointly partnered with us on this fabulous event. We love to always partner with them and have done in the past and will continue to do so. I also want to thank our fellow esteemed Berkman colleagues in the back for the wonderful space because they allow us to make this happen. So round of applause for you guys. And last but not least, I want to thank our ICF board because without their support and everything, Robin, Monique, Kelly, Miguel, Karen, who else, events like this happen. And I have to thank my boss ladies, which is Tammy, Janine, Tati in the back, because without their support, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you. As I was mentioning, earlier this year, we usually send out a membership survey. And during the survey, we ask, what do you want to hear? And what do you want to see? So one of the areas of opportunities was to enhance our business acumen. A lot of us here today are entrepreneurs, and we're here to seek, how do we take it to the next level? So you will hear from our fellow esteemed panelists today, their journey. Whether you are newly into your business, like less than a year, or you might be on this journey for some time, I encourage you to maybe think differently. Think about what you can take away from today's discussion that you might be wanting to implement for your business to take it to the next level. So, real quick, I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of our board. So here we go. We have our ICF board of directors here. Some of us have been able to join us today. You can put the faces to the names. So we have Robin back there, who's our esteemed president, and then Monique, who will be taking over in the future. And then Kelly makes things, make sure that everything finance happens. And then of course, Jack and Karen. Karen's there to make connections for us to all these different conferences and partnerships, as well as Susan. And then where's Miguel? Miguel's there as well, and making sure that we renew our memberships.
Renew your membership?
Yes. And then, of course, we have our Partners for Life, which are our OD board members. Soha, which is on our panel today. So you'll be hearing insights and thoughts from her. Ricardo, Gonales, am I pronouncing it right?
Gonales?
Yes. Barbara and Mitch. Mitch is here as well. Thank you, Mitch, and thanks to them for their involvement today and their partnership. So now, let's get started. So, as always, one of the things that we are always encouraged to do is have an elevator speech. So as opposed to me introducing our four esteemed panelists, we're going to kick it off by each of them sharing their elevator speech. So Roshni, take it away.
Hi everyone, so good to see you guys. I'm just gonna give you a forewarning because my elevator speech is not that great. I either speak too much or too little because I don't think I talk about myself in an elevator with anybody. So I'm gonna give it my best shot. Again, I'm Roshni Dalal. I am an executive coach, ACC executive coach. I just submitted my PCC application. Very excited about that. I'm also a mindfulness specialist, as well as a CPA, as well as a keynote speaker. My focus with my clients is helping rising leaders and individuals, executives, step into their potential, their full potential in their roles as they develop their mental capacity and resilience. So with my positive intelligence training and mindfulness mastery training, I developed a program that really helps my clients discover what's internally going on to prevent them from achieving success and happiness. And I also work a lot with my clients on shifting from a negative to a positive mindset when addressing their challenges. Most of who I work with is in the oil and gas industry, as well as finance and accounting because of my background. But as we get into our presentation, my ideal customer ends up being anyone with these common pain points. Thank you so much for having me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Javon Wooden, and my elevator speech goes a little something like this. So I empower leaders and organizations to cultivate empathetic leaders and cultures so they can increase employee engagement, retention, and profit.
So my elevator speech is a little bit different. I just tell a little bit about who I am and typically let other people ask me questions. So that's part of being a coach. So my name is Soha Huck, and I have a background in banking and finance. I worked extensively with the C-suite executives in oil and gas and healthcare and financial services, nonprofit industries. I found that when I was in the banking field, I was doing a lot of consulting and advising, and thought to myself, why don't I do this for myself? So did a little bit of a pivot and went into organizational kind of counseling, coaching, advising, and saw that, in my background, I had a lot of sales experience, a lot of a one-to-one client involvement. So I thought, let me go ahead and become a coach. And so I do a lot of organizational health and effectiveness strategy building. I do road mapping, project development, and I do team and individual peak performance coaching. And I was recently named one of 25 global leaders of influence here in Houston. And so I do a lot of that in my coaching and my client delivery.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm acutely aware that the guy who's very good at personal branding didn't need notes for his.
Good observation.
Me on the other hand.
We both wanted to sit after him.
So I'm Ken Roseman. I'm the president of Thinking Partners. I help teams work better together. And I leverage 37 years in a project management and engineering career to bring that experience to my coaching practice. And the people I really work with a lot of times characterize themselves as the overthinkers and overdoers. Maybe the underfeelers. And so many times I introduce myself as a recovering engineer. People seem to know what that means. To me, it just means that I focus on leaders like I was. And they're smart, they're hardworking, but they're finding that what brought them success just isn't doing that. So, or in other words, what brought them success in the past is not getting them what they think they want.
Thank you. Thank you. So what we have in store, folks, is we have some structured questions that we thought would be helpful as it talks about operations, strategy, marketing, sales, and then we'll also open it up to the floor. So first question for all of you, as you all know, just coaching, just being an OD consultant sometimes will only take you so far, but we are in a business, and being an entrepreneur typically comes from that mindset. So would love to hear from each of you, what's your business model? And just share with us a little bit about how it's evolved, how you started. Roshni, we'll start off with you.
So initially, I didn't really have much of a business model. I was pretty much willing to work with whoever would talk to me and take me on board. It was pretty basic. And I think over the years and over time, as I discovered what my strengths are, what is it that I uniquely bring to my practice, and who I really want to help, what are the pain points that I really want to address, I think that helped me over time develop a business model, which now, as I mentioned in my introduction, involves offering a mental fitness program that I have along with my coaching sessions. And this mental fitness program is not something I created. It was created by Positive Intelligence, but I always knew that I wanted a product to go with my service because I could recognize early on it wasn't going to be enough. especially financially sustainable to continue on seeking these clients one-to-one. So my business model has evolved to become part of this mental fitness program as well as coaching, and then has gone even further to offer workshops and retreats and things using my expertise, essentially. Thank you.
So my business model initially started off, I actually began focusing on overcoming overwhelm for Black men. My company was initially called Live Not Loathe. It since has transformed into something a lot bigger than I had imagined it would be. So now I have since added from going that one niche in that one service to now offering from speaking engagements. That's really how I funnel a lot of my business in, is I do keynote speeches or panel discussions or workshop facilitation. And then I also have the coaching, so coaching one-to-one, group teams, etc. And then I also take that to the consulting side. So I'm all about building a value ladder that increases the lifetime value of that client. So the consulting side is not just the how and the why and the what, but what are they going to do to implement that? Because that's what a lot of people struggle with. They'll say, hey, that's cool what you just said, but what do I need to do, right? So that's what I do now, is I just take them through that whole value ladder to improve that.
So as far as my business model, similarly to what Rashmi said, in my prior career, I was realizing that I was doing a lot of consulting to my banking clients. I was doing a lot of support, project mapping, strategic guidance, and I thought this is something that I can do for clients, and more as far as corporate clients, more smaller clients, and people that actually I can make a difference. So when I went out and decided I wanted to start my own business, I thought, okay, what type of business do I want to target? And I really feel like I'm very involved in the nonprofit sector. I do a lot of philanthropy and things like that. So I thought, I'd like to focus on the nonprofit arena specifically. So I do a lot of consulting and coaching for them. It's very rewarding. I feel like that's the place where you can see the most impact. And so I started that way, and actually that has grown, because typically what happens is people that sit on these boards of these community organizations, they are executives at other companies. And so that's kind of been my entree into the consulting world. I do, like I said, organizational effectiveness and health. There's a lot of leadership coaching and developing, and team dynamics, conflict resolution, culture alignment. There's a lot of companies that, as you all know, mergers, acquisitions, sell-offs, and what's the surviving culture that's going to be at that company. And typically a lot of people that come into leadership positions are engineers, accountants, and so they might not have the leadership coaching that is required to lead a team. So that's kind of how my role has evolved. I mean, I was, in the banking world, I was top salesperson for many consecutive years. I did a lot of different projects, and I thought, why don't I just apply this to my own business? So it's kind of evolved, as Rashmi said, you just don't go in, but I think everything fortuitously ends up happening. The journey just kind of takes over. And I took some time off. I actually exited the work arena. I was in corporate for 16 years. I exited to raise 2 daughters. And as they were getting ready to enter high school, I thought, what, this is the time for me to kind of go back to school with them, and kind of pivoted from banking into more of an HR role and consulting. So, thank you.
Like a politician, I heard the question, but I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. I said, I don't like that one. So rather than business model, I want to talk about business plan. Because I think this is where how we articulate what things so well articulated. So in my project management career history, we would spend months and millions of dollars creating an execution plan for a big project. So as a solo entrepreneur, I will tell you that does not work. My first business plan was 40, 50 pages, and everything kind of compiled in there, and so it was good work. And even what I have now is maybe backed up by some thought, but it doesn't need to be so long. Matter of fact, it's 3 pages. So I want to go over the quick table of contents and the bullets. It's in what I think is a good, and after looking at quite a few other small business plans, what should be in there. So I like it. So part one, the vision. If you don't have a vision, get one. There's a lot of coaches here who can help you. But it's even better than that, to really refine that, because it should maybe move a little bit, but hopefully it stays the course for several years. I work with a concept called Bigger Game, Rick Tamlin's book called The Bigger Game, which really speaks to what's it about this year, what's really this year's part. And that kind of ties into long-term strategy. There might be 6 key factors, key success factors for the year. So I'll capture those. They capture, just where that's going to come from. Financial, it's uncomfortable for me to say, well, how much money do I want to make this year? But everything does kind of flow from that. And so, I'll make the statement, 5 bullets of saying, how much income do I want to have and where's that going to come from? To your point, is it coaching, is it facilitation, is it whatever else it might come from? So if that's the case, then the next part is marketing. How will people hear about you? And then sales. What are the indicators? So if to make the math of, let's pick a number, 100,000, and if you need 10 clients or 20 clients to make 100,000, then how many offers do you need to make to do that? How many contacts do you need to make to really give dignity to your vision, dignity to your plan, to your vision, as well as your goals? And then personal development. We're all kind of geeks for that. At least I am. I'm a geek for that. And so I got 3 bullets for things I'm going to do for my marketing scape and sales skills. And I got 5 things for my coaching development. A list of, this is really important, I'm going to come back to this several times, I think, today, is that list of key support team and allies. I don't think anybody here can do it on their own. So really identifying, and if you're just getting started, what is your SWOT? Where's your gaps? I didn't know anything about marketing and sales, so I needed support in that. So measurements and metrics, I don't do that as much. Important part, what am I not going to do? I don't think a strategic plan is complete until it says, what are we not going to do? For me, it's like, well, don't take the latest training that just looks good and is shiny, because it'll take time. And then the very last part is actually what some people call the tech stack. Where's your Gmail going to be, or where's your email going to be? What calendar tool are you going to use? For me, it's 20 bullets. It's quite a few.
Yeah. And we'll get into more of that in terms of that support. But thank you all. So what I was really hearing based on what everyone said is diversity is key. Like, don't silo yourself to one sort of offering. And it sounds like it's an evolution. Like, over time, you're adjusting, you're finding what's true and meaningful for you, what value you're adding to your customers. So thank you all for that. Appreciate it. Okay, so the next question is around marketing. And I'd love to hear from all of you, what does your ideal client look like? And most importantly, how did you decide on that client and when in your journey? So we'll start off with Ken, so we'll kind of mix it up a little. Shocker there, Ken. Just to diversify.
I'm enjoying being the last one.
We'll mix it up.
So, yeah, I come from an analytical background, that heady background, and so analytical industries is kind of where I go. But that's actually a pretty big group. It could be engineering, it could be finance, it could be insurance. Also the doers, the constructions, people who do that, construction and manufacturing is something where I can walk in the door and I have a bit of credibility because I can say I've been on a critical path and I know about project management. Kind of in that history of how that came about, 2020 was going to be my breakout year, which was, remember that year? And so it really turned it into much more online work. And so over the course of years, over that time, I worked with people from Miami to Vancouver on, mostly all through Zoom. Well, actually all through Zoom. And the pivot now is really to be more Houston-based and more one-to-one coaching based. So I still for me, the team development part and the facilitation is kind of an avenue in, because the ideal client is, that engineering team or that technical team, that manufacturing team, where we do work together and then, I do individual coaching. That's the ideal people.
Soha.
So I would say on my flip side to what Ken said, my preference is local. I mean, obviously during COVID was when I was kind of starting to develop my whole strategy, my whole business plan. So I'm a little bit newer maybe than some of the others here on the panel. But I would say my ideal client is somebody who's local, who is small to mid-size, where I can actually make significant relationships, deep relationships with the people in the team. And I've oil and gas, small oil and gas companies, finance, because my background is finance, nonprofit, as I mentioned, healthcare, and also higher ed. I've also worked in higher ed. So, local higher ed, there's lots of stuff going on at the universities, lots of issues that are coming up, new board members and new directions, CEOs, chancellors, deans. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So my typical and my preferred client is somewhere that I can make a difference significantly. Corporates, I kind of tend to stay away just because I think that, they'll bring in, a lot of times I've been into organizations where they've had a BCG or somebody who's come in and they've had a great plan, they've had a huge document, and then execution has just kind of fallen flat. And since I'm a one-man show, obviously one-woman show, it's not easy for me to take one of those and kind of help on that aspect. So I kind of look at a team project, something a little bit smaller that I can get involved and get my hands on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Come on.
So for me, it really depends on the vertical. So for speaking, I speak a lot to corporations and associations, mainly on empathy. So less empathetic cultures, right? So that could be construction. Tech is well known for not being very empathetic, and surprisingly healthcare, right? Even though they work all day, every day with patients and stuff like that, the leaders in the corporate space are not very empathetic. So that's what I find that vertical really works well for me. For the coaching side, it's industry agnostic, but I tend to focus on team leads because they are in that mid, they still drive change, but they haven't quite hit that scope where they're in that director level and above. So I tend to focus on that. And they typically have about 50 to 200 employees in that company. And then consulting, again, is the same vertical, but typically professional services and tech. So that would be my ideal clients.
So my answer is a little different because I do believe in the value of journey, like Soha mentioned. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey here because I started off as a CPA, as I mentioned, seeking to do this work, coaching, facilitation, whatever it is, for high performance partners that are CPAs or in public accounting. I have years of experience in oil and gas, so I said, okay, it's going to be high performance partners in oil and gas. Only to recognize that, I need to align the real need that hasn't been met in the market with my strengths. That's where I will start to hit a more specific niche for myself, and I will most likely uncover a lot for myself and my clients. So I saw the need being in these high performance leaders, just a lack of resilience, lack of tools to handle these huge challenges, setbacks that they were facing with no internal support coming from themselves. So again, I used my business background, corporate experience, mindfulness training, and I decided my ideal customer would be those that need me in the areas of stress management, anxiety management, resilience, and handling transitions. So that's kind of, spread out a little bit and over different industries, but that's my ideal customer today.
That makes sense. And I think that point that you just mentioned, Roshni, around really trying to identify what are your strengths and doing a little bit of self-reflection and then seeing what the market has to align against that. Okay, thank you all. Yeah, so
If I can just hop in here and just say one more comment. You kind of triggered something in my mind. Recently, I came through and I took the Berkman certification, which we sat in this room actually and did it. And I was looking at these panels up here, the red, green, blue, and yellow, and I don't know how many of you know anything about the Berkman, but it's interesting because, you know, we took this assessment for ourselves, and I showed up as red, you know, and red is basically actions, you know, doer, you know, get things done, you know, this type of, you know, strategic, and so I showed up like that. Then when you drill down into the assessment, and I'm sharing this about myself, you started looking and I'm like, no, I'm a lot more sensitive, I'm a lot more feeling, I'm very socially aware, I have this emotional intelligence and all that. So what was happening was I was submerging all that, because in corporate life and in the corporate world, you have to be red to be pushed up and to, you know, succeed. So it was really interesting. I thought this is kind of a good way to connect with my clients as well, you know, because how they show up at a corporate level and what they do at their jobs might not be who they really are.
Yeah.
And so there's this conflict. And so it was, you know, I just took that as part of my training and part of my identifying with my clients now.
Yeah.
That it's just so much more, it resonates so much more. And when you have that conversation with them, you sit across the table with them, you kind of see them, you know, realizing that. And it was really exciting. It was a really neat epiphany.
I think you brought up a good point, and Roshni referred to it earlier. You know, as you're thinking about your own business, in addition to the clients, thinking about what sort of platforms or assessments that you might want to align to, right? And sometimes, you know, that also plays into who your target audience is. So that's a great kind of segue also to think about services. So kind of building on this ideal marketing client avatar, Soha and Javon, I'd love to hear from you in terms of how you got your first client.
Yeah, so I actually got my first client from starting a Facebook group. And as I told you, I started initially focusing on men. And I just ran live weekly, you know, talks, conversations where we had like a specific kind of talk that we were going to do a topic on. And there was someone on there who really resonated. And at that time, he came on early. I was like, oh, he's probably gonna be the only one. So we just started talking. Right? And this is a good lesson for you all. Don't worry about how many, because if that person's on there, then that is the person for you, right? So he was on there, and we just started having a conversation, and he was like, yeah, I need you, right? This is what I need. This is what I know. And he ended up having relationship issues and all these other things. So we worked for a long time together. He was my flagship client for a while. You know, just starting out on that business. And I learned a lot from that, right? From that first client that we'll kind of get into later. I don't want to monopolize this time, so I'll let Soha talk.
Okay, as far as my first client, I would have to say, like I mentioned before, I am very involved in community. I do a lot of nonprofit work, and I'm on a lot of boards and committees. And one of my first client came through one of the boards that I work on. And they heard about me, and they just kind of, the things that I was talking about resonated with them. And I think it's, I was mentioning to Ken and Javon earlier, you know, I grew up overseas, I grew up all over the world, and I think that your ability to connect with people speaks for itself. And so what happened was I was in this meeting, and I was talking about some of the ideas that I had, and they were like, you know, this potential client said to me, you know, do you have time offline afterwards so we can get together, because I want to hear about some of the ideas you have. And that's the same situation. It just kind of grew and developed, and it actually grew to quite it was like a 1.5-year project. And you know, this person was was on the board, who was actually an executive at a company. And so just kind of brought me in the company and said, we want you to do these types of things for us. So it was actually a really great gig for me. And that's one of the things I want to talk about is also, you know, when you talk about how much money you want to make and how you want to grow your business, you know, if you have one main client, this is how I look at it. If I have one main client, which is like my main bread and butter for the 6 months, 8 months that I can kind of work that through, and then do facilitations and workshops, small little gigs here and there, then you kind of can supplement to round out your
Like diversify. So I'm curious, both of you, since that first client, like, how have you evolved as you continue to seek prospects? Like, what did you learn from that experience in terms of how you're applying it today when you seek prospects?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, I am not scared to say, I don't say no, but I make sure I understand the entire project or dig deep before I'm quick to just say, oh yeah, this is great, I can do this for you. So you kind of get comfortable with who you are and what you want to be known for, your brand. And so I would say as far as my evolution, I'm just a little bit more confident to say, confidence was not my issue before, but I think I was just so desperate to just have another client that I would just take whatever and realize that that might not be the best use of my time. And so just, be okay with digging down, drilling down, ensuring that everything that what the client wants or the questions that you've asked align with who you are. I mean, I keep coming back to that because for me, that's really important.
Yeah.
Because then if you have that sense of purpose and that sense of alignment, then it becomes fun. And it's no longer like, okay, this is a job that I have to do. Because when you sit down at your desk, and I work from home, I have my own home office, you want to be really inspired when you sit down and do it and just not be like, okay.
Like, oh, gotta do this.
Yeah, so you want to, every time I sit down and plan something, an individual plan for my client, for the person that I'm coaching, I feel inspired and I
Yeah.
feel excited.
You feel excited.
Yeah.
It's a partnership.
Yeah, exactly.
Siobhan, what about you?
Yeah, so I've matured a lot when it comes to marketing. So I no longer, just do the Facebook group thing. So what I've found that works for me is a mix of high touch and low touch marketing. So high touch marketing is you're virtually immediate. They can ask you a question right then and there, maybe a live webinar, a speaking engagement, etc. And then I have low touch marketing. So I have a podcast. I do a lot of podcast interviews on other people's shows. I do a lot of guest blogging. Content marketing has really been key for me. LinkedIn, right? If some of you follow me, you probably see that I post constantly because I've realized that it really takes people from cold to warm as far as a prospect very, very quickly. If they're constantly seeing your what you're talking about, they know that you know what you're talking about, one. And then two, they start feeling as if they know you. So you really, as a coach, we have to build trust before anything. If they don't have the trust, they're not going to come to you. And when you think along the customer journey, right, the first step of that is to grow awareness. Once they become aware of you, then they're going to consider you if you are speaking their language, as Soha talked about the values, right? Once you do that, that's where that discovery call, sales call, whatever else comes, right? But you have to make sure that you know exactly who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, what solutions they want. So one of the things I always tell coaches, and I forgot to mention I coach entrepreneurs as well, service-based entrepreneurs, is they don't care about the journey in between. They want to know what that transformation is. So anytime I'm talking, I'm going to tell you I know that you're feeling this. I know that you're doing this. Here's what it would look like after you work with me, right, on everything. And then email is not dead. Make sure you're using them email lists, because we don't own those platforms, right? The Instagrams, the Facebooks, the LinkedIns, we don't own those. So if those go down, which we've seen Facebook and Instagram go down, then you're screwed, right? So you want to make sure you're pulling them off whatever platform, even if you're speaking, right? Get your QR code, make sure they can scan that thing and connect with you, and then networking events. This is one of my favorites. If you're at a networking event, don't say, hey, let's schedule a meeting and then go off somewhere. Schedule it right then and there, right? Because the main thing as a coach is get people on the call. You can get them on the call, even though you might not be there to sell. You'd be surprised what comes up. I always say I come to a call with no expectations. I aspire, right? I aspire to establish a relationship, build a rapport with you. What that looks like, I have no idea. Could be a partner, could be a friend, or could be a client. So just make sure you come to the call, show up authentically. Don't say before you get on that call, this person is not my ideal client, wasting my time. You never know what may come of it. They may not be that, but maybe they know someone who can be that. So make sure you show up wholeheartedly and fully and give them, all the value that you can.
That's great. What I was hearing there, Siobhan, was consistency is key. Be on top of them. Strike them when it's hot, right? You don't want them to walk off and be like, oh, darn it, I should have caught them. And they're like, we moved on to the next person.
Because you only have 3 days.
Yeah.
People will forget you after about 3 days.
For sure.
So if you do not capture that, so if you go to a conference and you don't reach out, you might as well forget about it. But I do have a tip, and we'll talk about it later, that will close all gaps, right, in time. So one of the things I like to do if I did miss that window, or maybe it's been months or years, but I want to tell someone like, I'm doing this thing. I like to find something like, LinkedIn, for instance, is my platform. I'll look at their profile, see what the latest thing they talked about, right? And then I'll go find an article or a video that resonates with that. And I'll say, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. I thought you could use it, right? I hope all is well. That closes all space and time, right? Because they're gonna say, oh, well, thank you so much. How have you been? And now it's game on now. So.
It's a great point, because I think ultimately there's so many of us out here, right, doing all that we do, and we're all great at it. But it's that personal connection. They're investing in you, right, as your coach, as your consultant. So that's kind of that personal touch that you're giving.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the next question is a question I feel is like politics and religion. We don't want to talk about it, but we're always curious about it. Pricing, right? So we'd love to hear, Roshni, from you and Siobhan around how do you price? Just share with us, how you come up with your pricing. Heck, even what's been your low, high, whatever you'd like to share. Do tell.
Well, it is quite the loaded question, and I'm sure everybody wants numbers. But as we all know, those numbers are out there. Any of us can look it up. What is the standard, practice for an ACC, PCC, NCC? But again, I want to really walk you through my own journey with pricing, which started off with a cup of coffee, right? And then went to hundreds of dollars, like most people. But more than understanding those numbers, I feel like you got to understand your impact. What is the value that you're creating? What are you actually transforming in this person? And I found at every stage of my coaching, whenever I was able to enable that transformative change, it gave me a little more self-confidence, a little more self-awareness, and I was able to easily raise that price. So for me, the focus is on just becoming the best coach you can out there. Following these great examples like Marsha Reynolds or John Whitmore, performance coaching, following them, reading up on them, watching their videos, taking in their tools, and just like giving somebody a irresistible coaching session that they just want to keep coming back to you for. And at every stage when you do that, you can say to yourself, okay, well, there's been like 3-4 clients lately that I've just transformed. Well, that's your opening to raising that price. And it is a bit of a trial and error, but it's your own trial and error. So that's my answer to you on pricing.
Yeah, so for me, early on, I traded time for money, right? I would say, $150 for an hour, right? 60 in a session, but I don't do that anymore. Now I go for the result. So I do value-based coaching. So if they say, we want to improve, I'm a leader and I want to build empathy so I can stop losing high-performing team members, right? Then that's worth a lot of money. So when I'm getting on that call, I want them to tell me how much it's worth to them, right? I want to see if I can find their budget because I'm in a corporation. I know they have more money than myself or any of us would be willing to pay. So I'll find get their budget numbers first. If they're not willing to tell me that, then I will say, okay, here's what I've done in similar situations for leaders like yourself, right? I typically charge X. How does that sound to you? Then I'm quiet, right? I'm going to let them think about it, let them feel, and then they'll say, well, that sounds good, or, I was thinking more like this. Now we're in a negotiation, right? We're in that negotiation phase, so now I can go from that. So that's one. If I'm talking to an individual, right, then I'll set a price for and say, okay, we'll do a 3-month engagement for whatever the price is, right? Now, what I will say as a coach is when, we're taught or do packages of sessions, I don't like that model, right? I personally don't like it because, again, I'm trading time for money. So I'd rather say, okay, what are we working towards, all right? And then find out, again, what's that value? And to do that, I'll do like a form, an application, right? How much is that worth? What are you struggling with? So when I get on that call, they already feel like I know exactly what's going on, and then I can kind of talk to them on that. Now I will say that when I'm not going to price gouging, right? I'm still going to have a range, so that's important. Have integrity, but you also want to make sure that you're not discounting yourself just to get that sale. Because once you start doing that, it becomes a perpetual thing, right? Especially for new coaches. If you set a price, have it in your mind. This is my price. This is all I'm going. So if you do say I'm a new coach, I'm gonna start off at $100 an hour, do not go to $50 an hour just to get that person. Don't. Because you're gonna keep doing that, right? It's a mentality thing. Don't have that scarcity mindset to say, you know, I'm gonna discount how much I feel like my value is. Right? You gotta keep saying, this is not the only person that I'm going to talk to. Right? This is just someone, maybe they weren't my person quite yet, or maybe they weren't ready yet. And you'll be surprised, when you stand firm, a lot of people come back later and say, you know what, you're the person, right? So don't shortchange yourself.
So I love that response, but I want to go off script. So I'm going to challenge you both, and don't freak out. So I hear what you're saying in terms of value-based coaching, and I'm all for it because you're trying to get them to look at what they're going to be becoming versus now. But I'm curious, especially recognizing with our audience, like we have folks that are just starting off in the journey. Have y'all ever done hourly? Or have you always, okay.
Well, that's what I was saying. When I first started out, I did the hourly. But then,
Okay.
you know, as you go along, you realize, like, I'm shortchanging because people, for an issue, if it's really that dire,
Yeah.
their willingness to pay is going to be there, right?
Sure, sure.
So, and like I said, I'm not going to price gouge. I know exactly, you know, what the market will allow.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to keep going up and down based on the person, but there's always going to be a range there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, even if you go hourly, know your value and your credibility, right?
Absolutely.
That's what's important.
I just want to add to that, a lot of points that Javon made that were great. I just came back from the Middle East this past summer, so my coaching practice was in the Middle East, and then now it's set up here. So, you know, you've got to understand the market you're in, right?
Yes.
You can't be an American in the Middle East charging XYZ. So that was educational for me, understanding my expat life, the expats that I was around, and of course the culture and what their understanding was about coaching. The other point that I want to bring up is, you know, have a pricing model. As you get bigger and you're offering your package program and a proposal to say 7, 8 executive coaches at a company, they're going to question you, they're going to push you and say, well, you just said your investment was X number of dollars. What is this about? Well, be authentic, be ready to explain to them. You don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but, you know, for example, my own pricing model in a situation like that is I use a base rate, and then I use an hour or time that I spend on my clients before and after, and of course during, and I apply that base rate to all of that. And that helps me come up with a coaching rate for them. And then of course, like I said, I have a product that I offer them, so I have you know, X number of dollars for that product, that application that they'll be using. But it's just, transparency is gold, right? It creates trust, and it creates consistency, as Javon said. You know, you don't want to go into a meeting where you're closing a deal and you're just like, oh, price is getting in the way of things, right? And the other side to it, when you're not working for or with a company and you're working with individuals, I think it's also important to have compassion, right? Not everyone is going to be able to afford you on an individual level. So what can you do to make it, you know, palatable for them? Can you offer a you know, like a monthly plan, or, you know, kind of say, hey, we'll start out with a lower rate, but as we keep going and as your affordability grows, we can go up in our pricing. I think it's important to always make it about possibility over affordability. That's what is essentially closes the deal for a lot of clients.
Yeah, and one more thing I'd like to add is for people who I really want to work with who may not be able to afford my services, you have flexibility, right? So what I found is something called a laser coaching session. It's about a 15-minute session that we don't do all the formalities and all that stuff. We get right to whatever their issue is. Typically, they can afford that, right? So we might do a couple of those to get them that resolution. Or, again, I mentioned Value Ladder. You know, we have freebies. I have a book they can get, right? So I'll go down to a lower tier offering to ensure that I can still serve them in some way, shape, or form. I'm not going to leave them high and dry. And again, email lists, they're on there, they're going to get value, right? Because I'm not a big salesy person. I like to give them the transformation. So always have something else that you can offer, even if it's a free tier thing, you know, that you can give, or direct them elsewhere where if you know that someone else or another coach may get them.
Thank you both. Okay, so the next question that is around marketing. So I'll pose this to Ken and Soha. So I would love to hear what has been kind of your marketing journey? And most importantly in that, like what are 2 or 3 marketing channels or tools that have been most effective for you?
So, yeah, I'm a marketing amateur, as I began, and so I do enjoy writing, and I do like talking to people, I'm fascinated by marketing and sales. So I do enjoy writing about, doing a blog and doing things like that. My first draft is not bad, it's better, because I've studied quite a few people that do that. But I hired a copyright person. She's the one that did my website last year, and so we continued a relationship. She gets the draft, she makes it better. A lot of times she'll put part 1 and part 3, so she'll make big adjustments. But in general, the message stays true. She's very, very good at using my voice, seeing how I see things. And then actually that go out as a blog post and a newsletter, and then that will be cut up into 6, 8, 10 LinkedIn posts. So newsletter, LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I did a LinkedIn challenge this week. It was kind of fun. So if you look at me on LinkedIn, you'll see quite a bit of stuff. But a lot of the algorithm cheats and knowledge that you need to have for LinkedIn to be successful. And along with that, as the path continued, I went to quite a few webinars, and I think we have Chris Kenny here several years ago, and they're all good stuff. Books I'd recommend: The Prosperous Coach by Rich Litvin. That guy charges $40 for a little paperback, And then Spin Selling by Neil Rackman, an all-time favorite, which I think would be consistent with Joe. And I did a year-long program with the coach Rich Litvin, Rick Tamlin.
Oh, wow.
It's all about the business of coaching, and he ran or was very big in CTI for many years. Wrote several books about it, and it was so. I could have done that, or I could just have lunch with you. So, so I think it was good to have the reinforcement. I could have done a dozen laser sessions. Far better ROI. Yeah. So, and I also want to reflect on what you said earlier about as I got started. So I inherited a website. So I had an awesome mentor, kind of a founder actually of Houston ICF. So Bruce has just been a fantastic mentor. So when I started, it was his website, which was getting a bit antiquated and reflected Bruce. And so it actually took 2 or 3 years for me to really say, well, what is my offer? So that's when the current website came through. So that journey of how long does it take? It was 2 or 3 years, I think. So to figure out how can I articulate what differentiates me and how that goes. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, in terms of the marketing journey and what it looks like. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Soha, what about you?
Okay, so I wanted to just make one mention about pricing, go back to that, because that was something that Rushmi and Javon talked about. Just briefly, the background and the pre-work and the post-work and all that, a lot of people do start out with an hourly rate, which is fine, when you start out if you're early on in your career. But what happens is you tend to forget about, you have to do all this pre-work and post-work, and you need to be paid for the work that you put in. So if you transparently sit down with a client and you talk about all the things that go into understanding what their issues are, delving in deeper, it almost comes like when you start talking about numbers, they actually see the value. If you sit down with them and say, well, I did all this, I did all this preparation, I went through your assessment, and they kind of go through all that with you, then they realize, this 150 or whatever dollar amount doesn't really accurately reflect the time that you've put in to analyzing them, diagnosing them, pulling up a whole plan for them.
Yeah.
So I think in retrospect, basically what it is just be transparent with them, talk about how your value is being provided, and that I think makes them feel like they're part of the whole pricing process.
Sure.
And that happens at the corporate level too. I mean, if you're going in with a company with deep pockets and all, talk about what is the employee retention.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge right now. with COVID and the whole return to office and how people don't want to get back into the office, these tech companies. You know, a lot of these firms, the bankers, the investment banking, my daughter's an investment banker in New York. I mean, there's so many of these firms that are like, you have to be in the office 5 days a week now. And this younger generation is not having it. They are not having it. You know, they're like, see ya, you know, we want to be these virtual, remote, what they call them, remote workers or whatever. They want to go to Mexico City and work for 3 months. They want to go to Bolivia and work, I mean, it's like crazy. So, leadership and management is really having to figure out how to engage these kids. When I say kids.
As we're thinking about, you know, the mindful of time, can you share with us maybe just 2 or 3 marketing channels and tools that you use, and then we're going to transition it to the audience so they can ask some questions.
Sorry, I was kind of.
No, that's okay, that's okay.
As far as my marketing, I do, of course, LinkedIn. And I find that networking events for me is really how I get my business. I mean, it's really, it just depends on your personality. Like I said, I'm very involved in the community, World Affairs Council, 50/50 Women on Boards, which we have our chair sitting here in the audience, Susie. You know, 50/50 Women on Boards is one of the organizations that I'm very involved with since 2019. And so all of these networking, you know, people find out what I'm doing, I talk on panels, and so that's, to me, one of the best ways. LinkedIn, networking, going to these events, facilitation workshops, we'll do some workshops, and so word of mouth, that's, for me, it's word of mouth.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear. It's a lot about the connections of the relationships versus just like cold calling. And, you know, that doesn't work in our business.
And also, one other thing is, I mean, I've lived in the city for 34 years. My husband is in another field completely. I was a mom of 2 kids who danced, who played volleyball. You know, it's just your whole
The
network
connections, the
of
community.
Yeah, where
Yeah.
you lived, and so there's all different areas, you know.
Great, thank you.
I'll cut it short.
I was just
Siobhan,
gonna
one
say,
thought and then we'll open it.
yeah, one more thing that, you know, we're saying new coaches, but we also have to remember, just like Michelangelo, Picasso, right? They spent years perfecting their craft, and you have done the same thing, right? You may be new to the term coach, but your experience in fields and your life experiences makes it so you are actually a veteran. So do not discount yourself just because, you know, you weren't ICF certified. I know we're in ICF, but I just want you to know that. Like, do not discount yourself just because you weren't that, right? Because your experiences mean everything.
That's so true. So with that, we want to open it up to the floor. So questions for our panelists. And speak loudly, please. Unfortunately, we don't have a mic. Yes, and state your name and which group you're with.
I'm Andrea Leto. I'm with ICF, so I just recently joined this year. I joined like 4 years ago, and then COVID happened, and so I'm just getting back into it. But I'm very excited to be here. I have a lot of questions, but I'll just use one for now. Most relevant to what you were saying, Javon. When it comes to your timeline, knowing that, yeah, you probably spent years cultivating the self-awareness and the tools to become a coach, but from that first coaching session to where you are today, what, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, 12 years?
Yeah, so I'll share a quick journey of mine. So I started in 2017, and I started my business while I was in Afghanistan. I had to take a break. I took about 1.5 years off, and then I started back. This took about two years for me to get consistent clientele and consistent recognition. And one of the reasons was I didn't come with that built-in network, right? So it took some time for me to start doing outreach. I wasn't afraid to reach out to people and say, hey, let's have a coffee chat, right? So the time varies, but I'm gonna say prepare yourself for at least 2 years of like really going hard and being consistent. Do not get discouraged when that first marketing effort does not work, because that's just bound to happen.
Thank you.
Yes, I just add to that. Find a coach for yourself. Find a mentor or coach. You'll have a mentor anyway if you're going down the ICF path, but someone who's just done this before that you can have coffee with that will kind of guide you through the next few years. So much learning, like Javon said, so much awareness. You'll have your own path, but it's always nice to share that with somebody who's gone through it before you, and maybe someone that understands your niche and what you're looking to, deliver to your market.
Yeah, lean in. Thank you. Another question. Yes.
I'm Lorraine Lewis, and I'm with the ICF Houston chapter. This is a question from our table we were talking about ahead of time. So we've had clients that sort of finished their contract with us, but they love us, and so they say, ooh, can I just be on call? Can I just have something from you where I could just call you when I need you? What's your strategy for that sort of request?
Yeah, that's retainer, right? So just have the main retainer fees.
Yeah,
The retainer,
yeah.
yeah. And then you say, okay, you know, I need lead time, right? Set a lead time because you need boundaries, right? It's not you can just call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? You need lead time, right? We set
My
up
mother
a
can't
call.
even call me.
Right. You can call, but you're gonna get do not disturb. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I would do, like, formalize a retainer contract, and state exactly what that looks like. How many sessions can they get? It's not unlimited, right? So make sure that you specify all that in that contract.
Great feedback.
I got a follow-up, because I had a similar question, which is, let's say you have an original package and it's 3 sessions or 6 sessions or whatever, and that gets extended. At what point do you say, you know, this relationship has achieved its objective, and we need to maybe take a break, or, you know, proactively move them onto a retainer program? Because I think it's easy to keep, you know, oh, they're paying me, keep going. But is it beholden to say, I think we should take a break, I think we should reframe this? What are your thoughts on
Go ahead.
that?
I think that initially, when you set up your agreement, you need to have it very tightly solicited and very tightly documented of what your arrangement is. What happens is, very typically, is scope creep. And that basically what happens is it grows and it's not been discussed. So, you know, you're sitting in a meeting, this has happened, and you're sitting in a meeting and they're like, you know what, that sounds really good, we'd like to, you know, why don't we just add that? Why don't we add that? Okay, well then you need to go back and you need, which is great because you want a long-term contract. You want this to grow, you want it to be priced, but understand pricing changes. And so basically what I say is, let's cover what we have agreed upon with this pricing, and then with, you know, it doesn't scope creep it. It makes, basically you do a second project with the different pieces. That's how I do it, because otherwise it's just gonna grow and grow, and then you're right, how do you differentiate? You say, well, this was part of the original plan, this was not. So it just needs to be documented and designed exactly.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you know, different.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would add to that, often, like when you first start out, I'm not saying you just started, but, you know, you don't, specify what you're working on in that coaching agreement, right? It's just like, oh, whatever you wanna focus on, whatever your agenda is for each session. I would venture to say that it's better to say, okay, I want to work on goal setting. I want to work on prioritization, procrastination. So when you put that in, you have the agenda items, right? This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. And if we move through all 3 of those, that's the time to revisit, right? And you should always have like a check-in with, you know, after, I try to do it like if I have 6 sessions with that person. I'm gonna do 1 after 2, after 4, after 6, right? Just to make sure that I'm checking in, hey, are you still finding value in this, right? Anything coming up for you, etc. And that's how you're gonna know if it's time to end it. If you come to that session and you're like, hey, so what would you like to focus on today? And they're like, well, I didn't really, you know, then there's a time to be like, hey, let's check in. You know, do you
That's
feel like
working on the business, and that's having a platform. Do you use a platform when you document, and you will use different
so
tracking programs and?
So I track, right? So and tracking could be as simple as when you schedule that session. You know, so I use Calendly to schedule sessions, but you can do it yourself. Like if you manually schedule a session, you say, you know, JW1, right? JW2, so you know what session they're on, right? So you can track it that way. You can, if you use Calendly, it's going to show you how many times you met with this person. So there's different ways to track it, and you should be tracking if you're doing ICF certification anyway, right?
Right.
And also
So
billing
just-
too.
Yeah,
Billing,
billing, right.
that's why I was
But yeah, I would make sure that you're really focused in and you know exactly what goals you're looking to hit. And that's another way that you can do the value-based coaching versus session-based. Because session-based coaching, if you're doing that 6 sessions, they might just be coming just because they had 6, right? So with value-based coaching, I'm getting you the exact result, and we can kind of get a metric to gauge that.
I'm gonna just do a time check, guys. They are gonna be available because we do have some announcements and we're gonna hang around. But one question I have as we close off the session, and we can all hang till 1:30 and we have a couple announcements, is thinking about where you're at now and looking back at the time that you started, what's one piece of advice that you would tell yourself now?
Okay, I'll start. I would definitely tell myself to slow the bleed down. Okay, like I am like a little puppy in all different directions, wanting more, more, more. That's just how I'm wired. And that's what I would tell myself. I would tell myself to just stop and smell the roses, stop and just really take in each stage of this coaching, career that you're trying to build. Hone in on those competencies that you gotta learn for these certifications, that's what makes you stand out as a coach, right? Let's not just make it about checking the box. Let's make it about really, again, being the best that you can be as a coach and impacting that value that you wanna bring to your clients. And just kind of enjoying your own journey with it, right? So I learned so much about myself. And I feel like that's step one. If you really want to help other people, you have to dig deep into yourself and figure out what are your own saboteurs, what are your own stresses, right? What are your own pain points? And when you can kind of navigate that on your own, then you're a lot more credible and a lot more confident to be able to help others do the same. So that's my 2 cents, slowing down.
I'll talk to myself.
All right, I'll go. I would say for me, it would be, don't be so cautious, because that shows our personalities, I guess. I mean, for me, it's like I had to say, I have everything set in place, and now I'm gonna go ahead and start. I wish I had just started when I thought about it, I mean, that is the thing, and Susie and I have discussed this. I mean, it took me a couple of years to actually say, okay, now I'm gonna do this. I should have started when I thought about it, But, so don't think that you need to have everything. They say this about women anyway, that, when you apply for a job, you feel like women are like, oh, we need to have 99.9% of the qualifications to apply for the job. And a guy just walks in and he's like, of course I can do it, So, and not to say anything bad about that, but I'm just saying, we just need to be more confident. We just need to, and I wish I'd leaned in earlier, because I would have been further along in my journey. But you know what? It's all meant to be. I think that there's always a plan. So
just do
I'm
it.
saying, just do it.
Yeah.
Just don't overthink it.
Ken?
Mentors, allies, that angel client. You mentioned that client that like 60-70% of revenue, so that they, all the fear is gone. You're not dipping into your personal account. I had funds for a website, so it was all there. So, and so that, and really where that client came from, it was actually another coach. It was from an Enneagram community. So those trainings that we do together,
Yes.
when she called up, and that's been 60-70% of revenue for 2 years. And so, so that enabled so much, as well as just the joy. I like working with other people.
Yeah.
So, really cultivating allies and colleagues for that, as well as advice and experience, great experience. I had the gift of a mentor. I really wonder how anybody can start and say, I want to be a coach, and not really have somebody experienced helping them along and say, hey, I recorded the sales session, what do you think? Or here's the package I'm putting together, what do you think? Mentors can really help out with that. And it doesn't have to be just one. I would say I have 2. And so, or 2.5. So where was I? Angel client, allies, all the way around. Look at your SWOT. Is it marketing? Is it just coaching expertise? Whatever, and just cultivate that sense of allies. To me, it's a big deal.
All right, so mine, I would say success is insulated by failure. So we have to understand that is a part of the journey, right? And when you fail, you learn a lot more than when you succeed. So take time in the military, we do after action reports, right? So take time to do that after action report for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, what did I do right? What went wrong, and what can I improve? And then when you do that, now you can apply, you have that insight and intuition to apply it in the future. So that's really what I would say to myself.
Nice. Well, thank you all, Roshni, Siobhan, Soha, Ken, for your insights and expertise there. So round of applause.